Marcus Sullivan's horse reared back so violently he nearly lost his seat. Easy, Buck. Easy now. Mac fought the reins, squinting through the blizzard at whatever had spooked his usually steady mount. Then he saw her, and his own heart nearly stopped. A woman sat frozen against the Bitter Creek station wall, so still she could have been carved from ice. Her skin glowed an impossible shade of pale blue in the lamplight, and frost had formed delicate crystals across her exposed shoulders. But it was her ears, swept back in elegant points like nothing Mac had seen in 63 years of living, that told him this was no ordinary woman dying in the Montana snow. She wasn't human. Mac dismounted before his mind caught up with his body. December 23, 1885, in the middle of the worst blizzard to hit Montana in a decade, and here sat something that shouldn't exist. Her lips had gone white, her remarkable violet eyes were half closed, and her bare feet were turning black with frostbite. "Miss," his voice barely carried over the wind. "Miss, can you hear me?" Those strange eyes flickered open, focusing on him with desperate clarity. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but the words burned into his memory. "Please don't let them take me back. I'd rather die here." Then her eyes rolled back, and she slumped sideways into the snow. Mac caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed nothing, far too light for someone who appeared to be around 20 years old. Her skin was cold as death itself, that impossible blue color seeming to fade even as he held her. The station door burst open. Pete Garrison stood silhouetted against the warm light inside, his weathered face going slack with shock. "Mother of God, Mac. What is that?" "A woman dying of cold." Mac was already moving toward the door, carrying his burden. "Get out of my way, Pete." "But Mac, that ain't." Pete stumbled backward. "That's one of them things. Them aliens from the government reports. She's dying." Mac pushed past him into the blessed warmth of the station. "That's all that matters. Now get me blankets and hot water, or get the hell out of my way." He shouldered through to the back room, barely registering Pete's stammered protests. The pot-bellied stove radiated heat, and Mac laid the woman on the only cot, his old cavalry training kicking in. He'd seen frostbite at Antietam, seen men lose fingers and toes and worse. This woman, whatever she was, she had minutes, maybe less. Her hands were the worst. He pulled off her thin shawl and saw her fingers had gone gray. Working quickly, Mac rubbed her hands between his own, trying to force warmth back into them. Her dress was soaked through with melted snow, and he grabbed a blanket to cover her, mindful of her modesty even as he fought to save her life. "Pete," he roared. "That water." The station master appeared with a kettle, still staring. "Mac, you know what they say about these beings. They're dangerous. They got powers. She's got about 5 minutes before the frostbite kills her." Mac poured warm, not hot, water into a basin and began carefully submerging her hands. "You want to stand there talking, or you want to help?" Pete swallowed hard, but moved closer. "What do you need?" "More blankets. Coffee if you got it." "And Pete?" Mac looked up, his eyes hard. "Nobody hears about this. Nobody. Understand?" "Mac, they'll be looking for her. Government, probably. Maybe worse." "I know." Mac returned his attention to the woman's hands, watching for any sign of returning circulation. "That's why nobody knows she's here." For 10 minutes they worked in silence, warming her slowly, carefully. Mac had seen men die from being warmed too fast after freezing. The shock could stop a heart. He monitored her breathing, watched her face for any change. Finally, mercifully, he saw her fingers twitch. Color, that strange, beautiful blue, began returning to her skin. Her breathing deepened, steadied. "She's fighting," Mac murmured. "Come on, girl. Stay with me." Her eyes opened. For a moment she seemed confused, disoriented. Then her gaze locked on Mac's face, and he saw raw terror flood her features. No, it's all right." Mac kept his voice low, gentle, the way he'd once spoken to his horse after battle. "You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you. You saved me?" Her voice was stronger now, touched with an accent he couldn't place. "Why? Couldn't very well let you freeze, could I?" She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Then, to his complete shock, tears began sliding down her blue cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. I didn't think. I thought all humans were." She didn't finish. Mac didn't need her to. He'd seen that look before, on soldiers who'd been prisoners of war, on animals that had been beaten. This woman had been hurt, badly, and by humans. Outside, the blizzard screamed its fury against the station walls. Inside, an old rancher looked at a young woman with blue skin and pointed ears, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Stella." She said it like a prayer. "My name is Stella." "Well, Stella, I'm Marcus Sullivan, but folks call me Mac." He pulled up a chair beside her cot. "And once this storm passes and you're strong enough to travel, I'm taking you to my ranch. You'll be safe there." "Safe?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There's no safe. Not for things like me. They'll find me. They always find us." "Who will?" Her expression shuttered closed. "Men who steal people like me. Men who sell us." "Men who?" Her voice broke. "I escaped. Jumped from a train 3 days ago. I've been running ever since, but the cold." She looked down at her damaged hands. "I couldn't run anymore." Mac felt cold rage settle in his gut, the old soldier's fury at injustice. "How many others? In the shipment?" 12. "They're probably in California by now, being sold to whoever has the money." Stella's voice went flat, dead. "I should have died with them. At least then I wouldn't be alone." "You're not alone." Mac's voice was firm. "Not anymore." She looked at him with those impossible violet eyes, searching his face for lies, for traps. Whatever she saw there made something in her expression crack. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. I'm not even human. You're someone who needed help." Mac stood, moving to the stove to pour coffee. "That's enough." As he handed her the warm cup, their fingers touched briefly, and Mac felt the strange coolness of her blue skin. But underneath that, he felt her trembling. Not from cold this time, from hope. And that's when Marcus Sullivan, 63-year-old widower who'd thought his purpose in life was finished, realized he'd just found a new reason to keep living. Protecting this strange, beautiful, terrified young woman from whatever monsters were hunting her. Mac woke to silence and the smell of coffee. He jerked upright in the chair, momentarily confused, then remembered Stella. She stood by the small stove, wrapped in his coat that dragged on the floor behind her, carefully pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. In the morning light streaming through the frosted window, she looked even more otherworldly. Her pale blue skin seemed to shimmer, and her silver-streaked hair caught the light like spun moonbeams. "I hope you don't mind," she said without turning. "I needed something to do besides think." Mac stretched, his back protesting the night in the chair. "You should be resting." "I've been resting for 3 days. Hiding in barns, freezing in snow banks, waiting to die." She turned, offering him a cup. "Resting doesn't help anymore." He took the coffee, studying her face. The terror from last night had been replaced by something harder, more determined. Her hands, he noticed, looked remarkably better. Where last night frostbite had threatened to claim her fingers, this morning only faint discoloration remained. "You heal fast," he observed. "Fast enough to survive most things. Not fast enough to outrun men with guns and chains." She sat on the cot, curling her legs beneath her. "You should know what you're getting into, Mac. Before you take me to your ranch. Before you make promises you might regret. I don't make promises I can't keep. You don't understand." Stella's voice dropped. "The men who took me, who took all of us, they work for someone powerful. Someone with money and connections reaching all the way to Washington. They've been collecting beings like me for years. Dozens, maybe hundreds. We're commodities to them. Property." Mac felt his jaw tighten. "This is America. We fought a war over people being property. That was for humans." Stella's laugh was bitter. "Beings from other worlds don't have rights here. We're not citizens. We're not even considered people by your laws. When they catch runaways like me, there's no trial, no justice. They just take us back. Like hell they will." "Mac." "No." He set down his cup with enough force to make it ring. "I don't care what the law says. I don't care who these men work for. You jumped from a moving train to escape them. You walked 3 days through Montana winter alone. That tells me all I need to know about which side is wrong." Stella stared at him, and Mac saw her eyes beginning to shine with unshed tears. "Why do you care? You just met me. I'm not your responsibility. My wife Sarah used to say that every person who crosses your path is there for a reason." Mac moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "I lost her 3 years ago to fever. Lost my son James at Antietam back in '62. For 3 years I've been alone on that ranch, just waiting for my time to come. Then last night, in the middle of the worst storm I've seen in decades, I find you freezing to death on my way home." He turned back to her. "Maybe that's coincidence. Or maybe Sarah was right, and you were meant to cross my path. Either way, I'm not letting those men take you. They'll come, Stella warned. When they realize I'm not dead in the snow somewhere, they'll come looking. And they won't come alone. Let them. Mac's voice carried the steel of his old cavalry days. I've got a ranch that's defensible, rifles that still work, and enough stubbornness to outlast winter. They want you, they'll have to come through me. Stella stood, moving closer to him. Up close, Mac could see faint patterns in her blue skin, like frost on a window. Her violet eyes were wet now, tears finally spilling over. No one's ever fought for me before, she whispered. Not once in 20 years. Well, someone's fighting for you now. Mac reached out, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. Her skin was cool to the touch, but not cold. Different, but not wrong. Now, how about we get some real food in you, and then figure out how to get you to the ranch without half of Montana seeing us? A small smile touched Stella's lips. You make it sound simple. It is simple. You need help, I'm giving it. Everything else is just details. Mac grabbed his coat from where she'd left it. Stay here. I'll talk to Pete about supplies and a wagon. Better to have you under blankets than on horseback where folks can see. Mac, Stella called as he reached the door. Those 12 others who were with me in that railroad car, if we could somehow find them, help them. Mac stopped, seeing the desperate hope in her face. One thing at a time, girl. First, we get you safe. Then we figure out how to help the others. You'd really try? Even though it's dangerous? Mac thought of James, who died fighting to free people from slavery. Thought of Sarah, who'd never turned away anyone in need. I didn't survive the war and 40 years of ranching just to spend my last years hiding from a fight. If we can save those others, we'll find a way. Stella's smile widened, transforming her strange, beautiful face. Thank you, Mac, for everything. He nodded and stepped out into the cold morning air. Pete was already outside, nervously shoveling snow. Mac, we need to talk, Pete said in a low voice. I didn't sleep a wink last night. That creature in there. Her name is Stella. Fine. Stella. Pete leaned on his shovel. You know what'll happen if word gets out you're harboring her? There's laws, Mac. Federal laws about these aliens. If the government finds out, then we make sure they don't find out. Mac fixed Pete with a hard stare. You've known me 20 years, Pete. Have I ever asked you for a favor I didn't earn? Pete shifted uncomfortably. No. Then I'm asking now. Keep this quiet. Just until I can get her to the ranch and figure out our next move. And if those collectors come looking, because they will, Mac, these people don't give up on valuable property. If they come, they'll find an old soldier who still remembers how to fight. Mac pulled his coat tighter against the cold. Now, can you help me or not? Pete was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. I've got a wagon you can borrow, and some of my wife's old clothes that might fit her better than Sarah's things. But Mac, be careful. These men you're going up against, they don't play fair. Neither did the Confederacy. Mac clapped Pete on the shoulder. I'll manage. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, Mac glanced back at the station. Through the window, he could see Stella watching, that mix of hope and fear still on her face. 3 days ago, he'd been a lonely old man waiting to die. Now he had a purpose again, dangerous and complicated as it was. Sarah would have approved. The ride to Mac's ranch took 4 hours through snow that came up to the wagon wheels. Stella lay hidden under blankets and canvas in the wagon bed, breathing through a small gap Mac had arranged. Every time they passed another traveler on the road, miners heading to Butte, a supply wagon, a rider from one of the neighboring ranches, Mac's heart hammered in his chest. But no one stopped them. No one asked questions. You still alive back there? Mac called softly as they turned onto the narrow track leading to his property. Barely. Stella's muffled voice came from under the canvas. How much longer? 5 minutes. We're almost home. Home. Mac hadn't called it that in 3 years, not since Sarah died. It had just been the ranch or the place. But now, bringing Stella here, the word felt right again. The ranch appeared as they crested the final hill, a sprawling property in the shadow of the Bridger Mountains. The main house was 2 stories of solid timber and stone, built to withstand Montana winters. Nearby stood a barn, stable, chicken coop, and various outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant his hired hand, Tom Birch, had kept the fires going. We're here, Mac said, pulling the wagon up to the back of the house, away from the main road. Let me check that Tom's not around, then I'll get you inside. He found Tom in the barn, tending to the horses. The young man looked up with relief. Mac, thank God. I was getting worried with that storm. You get the supplies? Most of them. Had to leave a few things at Pete's place. Mac kept his voice casual. I'm going to unload the wagon, then I need you to ride into town for me. Got a list of things we need. Now. It's nearly dark. Tomorrow morning's fine. Just want you to start early. Mac pulled out some coins. Pete will have the supplies ready. And Tom, don't come back to the house tonight. I've got some things to sort through, some of Sarah's old belongings. I'd rather do it alone. Tom nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd worked for Mac long enough to know the man still grieved. Sure thing, boss. I'll bunk in the barn tonight, head out at first light. Once Tom was settled in the barn, Mac quickly unloaded Stella, guiding her through the back door and into the kitchen. She stumbled, weak from the journey and the days of running before that. Easy, Mac said, supporting her weight. Let's get you upstairs. There's a room that was, well, it's empty now. You can stay there. He led her up the stairs to what had been his son's room, unchanged since James left for war 23 years ago. Mac had kept it exactly as it was, a shrine to a boy who never came home. But looking at Stella, exhausted and still frightened despite her brave face, he knew James would have wanted this room used to shelter someone in need. It's not much, Mac said, lighting the lamp. But the bed's good, and you'll be warm. Stella sank onto the bed, looking around at the room. Her eyes fell on the shelf of books, the old army jacket hanging on the wall, the photograph of a young man in uniform. Your son, she asked softly. James. He was 18 when he enlisted. Died at Antietam, fighting for the Union. He looks like you. Same eyes. Stella touched the photograph gently. He would have been proud of what you're doing now. Mac's throat tightened. I hope so. Now, you rest while I get some food ready. When's the last time you ate a real meal? 5 days. They fed us scraps in the railroad car. Barely enough to stay alive. Fury rose in Mac again, hot and sharp. Well, you're done with scraps. I'll bring you up some stew and bread. Tomorrow, we'll figure out how to make this arrangement work. Mac. Stella caught his hand as he turned to leave. Her touch was cool but gentle. Why is it so important to you? The truth. Not just kindness to a stranger. Mac was quiet for a moment, looking at this strange young woman with blue skin and violet eyes who'd stumbled into his life. Because I'm tired of watching good people suffer while bad people prosper. Because my wife would have helped you without a second thought. And because, he paused, surprised by the emotion rising in his chest. Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm alive for a reason. Stella's eyes shimmered with tears again. I don't deserve this. Probably not. But then most of us don't deserve the good things we get. We just have to be grateful for them. Max squeezed her hand gently. Rest now. You're safe here. As he headed downstairs to prepare food, Mac found himself humming, something he hadn't done since Sarah passed. The house felt different somehow. Less empty. Less like a tomb and more like a home. He was ladling stew into a bowl when he heard it, the sound of hooves approaching fast. Mac moved to the window and felt his blood run cold. 3 riders were coming up the road, and even from a distance, he could see they weren't locals. They wore long coats and wide-brimmed hats, and one of them carried a rifle across his saddle. They'd found her already. Mac grabbed his own rifle from above the fireplace, checking the load. Then he went to the bottom of the stairs and called up softly. Stella? Don't make a sound. We've got visitors. He heard her quick intake of breath, then silence. Good. The girl had survival instincts. Mac stepped out onto the porch as the 3 riders reined in their horses. The lead man was tall and thin with a sharp face and eyes like chips of ice. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Evening, the man said. Name's Silas Webb. We're looking for some missing property. Figured we'd ask around at the local ranches. Property? Mac kept his rifle lowered but ready. What kind of property? The expensive kind. Webb's smile widened. Exotic specimen. Blue skin, pointed ears. Went missing from a transport train few days back. We've been tracking her through the snow. Trail led us this direction. Haven't seen anyone like that. Mac's voice stayed level. Storm's been bad. If something was out in that, it's probably dead by now. Maybe. Or maybe someone found her, decided to keep her. Webb's eyes swept over the ranch, calculating. See, this specimen is worth about $5,000 to my employer. That's a lot of money. Enough that some folks might be tempted to hide her, thinking they could sell her themselves. I'm not some folks. Mac shifted his grip on the rifle slightly. I'm a man who doesn't like strangers coming onto his property, making accusations. No accusations. Webb held up his hands. Just doing our job. My employer is very particular about getting his property back. So particular that he's authorized me to offer a reward. $1,000 to anyone who helps us find her. That's generous. It is. Of course, anyone who hides her would be guilty of theft. Federal theft. That's 10 years in prison if you survive the arrest. The threat was clear in Webb's voice. Mac met his eyes steadily. Like I said, haven't seen her. Now it's getting dark, and you're a long way from town. I suggest you move along. Webb studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll be moving along. But we'll be back. We'll be checking every ranch, every homestead in this area. That specimen belongs to my employer, and he always gets what he paid for. Safe travels, Mac said flatly. He watched them ride away, counting to 100 before he allowed himself to lower the rifle. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It had been years since he'd faced down armed men, but apparently he hadn't forgotten how. They're gone, he called up the stairs. Stella appeared at the top, her face pale even for her blue skin. You heard what he said. $5,000. That's more money than most people see in a lifetime. I could turn you in and spend the rest of my life ashamed of myself. Max set the rifle down. Not interested. Now get down here and eat this stew before it gets cold. Tomorrow, we're going to figure out how to keep you hidden and safe. Mac, they'll come back. They'll search the whole area. I know. Mac ladled stew into 2 bowls. But they're not taking you. Not from my ranch. Not from my protection. You have my word on that. Stella came down the stairs slowly, her violet eyes fixed on his face. When she reached the bottom, she did something unexpected. She hugged him, pressing her face against his shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. For choosing me over $5,000. For choosing what's right. Mac awkwardly patted her back, and used to affection after 3 years alone. That's what decent people do, girl. Choose right over easy. As they sat at his kitchen table eating stew, Mac looked across at Stella and realized something had shifted. She wasn't just a stranger he was helping anymore. She was becoming something more. Family. And Mac would be damned if he'd let anyone take family away from him again. By morning, snow had covered the tracks Webb and his men had made. Mac stood on his porch watching the sun rise over the Bridger Mountains, coffee steaming in his hands. Behind him, he heard the soft pad of feet and turned to find Stella wrapped in one of Sarah's old shawls, her silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep? He asked. I keep expecting them to burst through the door. She joined him at the railing, shivering slightly in the cold air. In the railroad car, we never knew when they'd come. Sometimes to bring food. Sometimes to take one of us away for evaluation. We learned to fear the sound of footsteps. Mac handed her his coffee. Drink this. I'll make more. She sipped gratefully, then went still. Her head tilted like a dog hearing a distant sound. Something's wrong. What? Your horses. They're distressed. She set down the cup and moved toward the barn, Mac following. As they approached, he could hear it too, the sound of a horse in pain, thrashing in its stall. They found Buck, Mac's usually steady mount, down in the straw, his sides heaving. White foam flecked his mouth, and his eyes rolled with pain. Colic, Mac said, his heart sinking. Bad case too. I've seen horses die from this. He moved toward Buck, but the horse thrashed harder, dangerous in his agony. Mac had treated colic before, but alone, with a horse this far gone, the chances weren't good. Let me try, Stella said quietly. You don't understand. He could kick, crush you. Please. Let me try. Something in her voice made Mac step back. Stella moved into the stall, moving with a grace that seemed almost liquid. She knelt beside Buck's head, placing her cool blue hands on his neck. Then she began to hum. The sound was unlike anything Mac had ever heard, not quite music, not quite words, but something in between. It resonated in the barn, making the air itself seem to vibrate. Buck's thrashing slowed. His rolling eyes focused on Stella's face. She kept humming, kept her hands on the horse, and Mac watched in amazement as Buck's breathing steadied. The tension left his body. After 10 minutes, the horse was calm, and after 20, he was on his feet, nuzzling Stella's shoulder like a grateful child. How did you do that? Mac breathed. Stella smiled, and in the dim barn light, she looked almost ethereal. On my world, we're connected to animals in ways humans aren't. I can feel what they feel, speak to them in ways they understand. It's why. Her smile faded. It's why I was valuable. Rich people would pay to watch me perform with wild animals, make them do tricks. A circus freak. That's not a curse, Stella. That's a gift. Mac moved closer, looking at Buck, who seemed perfectly healthy now. A real gift. Do you know how many ranchers would kill for someone who could calm horses like that? It's not just horses. Stella's voice was quiet. All animals. Birds, cattle, even wild ones. I've always felt more comfortable with them than with people. Animals don't lie. Don't hurt you for entertainment. Mac thought of the 12 others still in captivity, the abuse Stella had endured, and felt that cold rage kindle again. The men who had you, they'll pay for what they did. One day, I promise you that. Don't make promises you can't keep. I keep my promises. Mac opened Buck's stall, checking the horse thoroughly. He was fine, completely recovered. Stella, with your gift, you could help this ranch in ways I never imagined. I've got 30 head of cattle, a dozen horses, chickens, even a stubborn milk cow who hates everyone. If you could work with them, you'd let me stay. Really stay. Not just hide. You think I brought you here to keep you locked in James's room? Mac turned to face her fully. I brought you here because you need a home, and I've got one with too many empty spaces. If you can help with the animals, that's just a bonus. Stella's eyes filled with tears again. She seemed to cry easily, Mac noticed, as if 20 years of not being allowed to cry had left her with a surplus. I've never had a real home. Never had a place where I was wanted for more than what I could do. Well, you've got one now. Mac moved toward the barn door, then paused. There's something else you should know. Tom, my hired hand, he's a good man, but he doesn't know about you yet. I can't keep you hidden forever. Eventually, we'll need to tell him. What if he tells others? He won't. Tom's been with me 5 years, since right after Sarah died. He's loyal. But I wanted you to be ready before I brought him in. Stella nodded slowly. All right. I trust your judgment. Good. Mac smiled. Now let's get breakfast started. And later, maybe you can meet the rest of the animals. That milk cow Bessie could use some of your magic touch. She's been dry for 2 weeks, and I can't figure out why. They walked back to the house together, and Mac noticed Stella moved differently now. Less like someone running, more like someone settling in. She paused to watch a hawk circling overhead, her face lifted to the winter sky. You know what I missed most in that railroad car, she said softly. Open sky. They kept us in darkness most of the time. I'd forgotten how beautiful the world could be. Montana's got the best skies in the country, Mac said. Sarah used to say you could see all the way to heaven from our porch. She was right. Stella looked at him. I wish I could have known her. She would have liked you. Would have probably had you helping in her garden within a day of meeting you. Mac smiled at the memory. Woman never met a living thing she couldn't nurture. They'd just reached the house when Tom came riding up, back earlier than expected from town. Mac tensed, ready to hide Stella, but Tom was already off his horse and talking fast. Mac, there's trouble in town. Those men from yesterday, they're questioning everyone, searching buildings. They've got some kind of official-looking papers. People are scared. Mac and Stella exchanged glances. Webb was moving faster than Mac had expected. There's more, Tom continued. They're offering $1,000 reward, like the man said. Some folks in town are getting greedy, forming search parties. They'll be combing the countryside by tomorrow. Mac made a decision. Tom, there's something I need to tell you. Something that's going to test your loyalty to this ranch. Tom looked between Mac and Stella, seeing her clearly for the first time. His eyes widened as he took in her blue skin, her pointed ears, her obvious non-human features. Holy, Tom stumbled backward. You're the one they're looking for. Easy, Tom. Mac moved to stand between them. Before you do anything, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you why she's here, and why I'm not turning her in for that reward. Tom's hand had moved to his pistol, but he didn't draw. I'm listening. As the Montana sun climbed higher, Mac began to talk. He told Tom everything, finding Stella freezing to death, the men who'd enslaved her, her escape from the railroad car. He told him about her gift with animals, about the choice Mac had made to protect her. When he finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Stella. You really jumped from a moving train? Yes, Stella said quietly. And these men, they kept you in chains? Sold people like property? Yes. Tom turned to Mac. Boss, you know what you're asking me to do. Lie to federal authorities. Help harbor what they're calling a fugitive. Could lose everything. I know. Mac met his eyes steadily. I'm not asking you to risk anything. If you want to leave, take your pay and go. No hard feelings. But if you stay, you're part of this. Part of protecting her. Tom looked at Stella again, really looked at her. Saw the fear in her violet eyes, the way she held herself ready to run. Then he looked at Mac, The man who'd given him a job when he was down on his luck, who'd treated him like family. "How much is the reward again?" Tom asked. Mac's heart sank. $1,000. And you're turning that down to protect her? Yes. Tom nodded slowly. Then I guess I am too. Because if a man like you thinks she's worth protecting, that's good enough for me. He extended his hand to Stella. "Tom Birch. Pleased to meet you, miss." Stella stared at his outstretched hand, then took it, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're not going to turn me in?" "Turn you in?" Tom snorted. "Ma'am, my grandmother was a slave before the war. If Mac says you were kept in chains and sold like property, then as far as I'm concerned, you've got every right to be free. The color of your skin doesn't matter to me." Stella's face crumpled, and she started crying in earnest now. Tom looked alarmed, but Mac just put a hand on his shoulder. "Those are happy tears, Tom. She's not used to people being decent to her." "Well, she'd better get used to it," Tom said gruffly. "Because if we're protecting her from those men, she's part of this ranch now. Part of this family." Mac felt something in his chest expand, warm and full. Family. That's what they were becoming, a strange, cobbled-together family of a widowed rancher, a young hired hand, and a blue-skinned woman from another world. Sarah would have loved it. "All right then," Mac said. "Tom, help me figure out the best places to hide Stella if those search parties show up. We need to be ready." As they went inside to plan, Mac looked back at the mountains surrounding his ranch. Somewhere out there, Webb and his men were searching. The fight was coming, whether Mac wanted it or not. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt ready to fight, because he had something worth fighting for. Webb and his men arrived 3 days later with the sheriff. Mac saw them coming from a mile off, a line of riders kicking up snow, moving with purpose toward his ranch. He'd been expecting them, had prepared for them, but seeing the actual approach still made his pulse quicken. "Stella, get to the hiding place," he called into the house. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. Over the past 3 days, she'd settled into ranch life with surprising ease. She'd helped with the animals, cooked meals, and even started teaching herself to read from James's old books. Mac had caught her several times sitting in his son's room, touching the spine of books like they were treasures. "How many?" she asked, her voice calm despite the fear in her eyes. 5 plus Sheriff Rawlings. "Go on now. Don't come out until I give the all clear." Stella moved quickly to the hidden room Tom had helped prepare, a space behind a false wall in the root cellar. It wasn't perfect, but it would pass a cursory search. Once she was hidden, Mac and Tom positioned themselves on the porch, rifles in easy reach, but not openly threatening. The riders came to a stop in the yard. Sheriff Rawlings, a gray-haired man Mac had known for 15 years, dismounted first, looking uncomfortable. "Mac," he said with a nod. "Sorry to bother you." "No bother, Ben. What brings you out here?" Webb dismounted next, his cold eyes already scanning the ranch buildings. "I believe you know, Mr. Sullivan. We have a warrant to search your property for stolen goods." "Stolen goods?" Mac kept his voice mild. "Don't recall buying anything stolen lately." "Not goods you bought. Goods you're hiding." Webb pulled out an official-looking document. "This warrant authorizes us to search your property for one alien specimen, property of the Transcontinental Exhibition Company, valued at $5,000. Sheriff Rawlings shifted uncomfortably. "Mac, these papers look official. Federal seal and everything. I have to let them search." "Federal seal for what, exactly?" Tom spoke up. "A person? Because last I checked, we fought a war about whether people could be property." "These aren't people," one of Webb's men spat. "They're animals. Freaks." "Watch your mouth on my property," Mac said quietly, but with enough steel that the man stepped back. Webb smiled that cold smile again. "Mr. Sullivan, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either you let us search peacefully, or we search anyway and add obstruction charges to your record." Mac exchanged glances with Tom, then nodded. "Search. But you touch anything that's not yours, we'll have words." For an hour, Webb's men went through Mac's house, barn, and outbuildings. Mac watched them rifle through his things, through Sarah's preserved belongings, through James's room. He watched them search the barn, questioning Tom aggressively about what he'd seen. They found nothing. Webb's frustration was visible when they gathered back in the yard. "She's here. I know she's here. The trail ended at this ranch." "Maybe she kept moving," Sheriff Rawlings suggested. "Storm covered the tracks." "Or maybe she's dead," Mac added. "You said yourself she'd been out in that blizzard for 3 days. Montana winter doesn't forgive mistakes." If she's dead, we'll find a body. Not if the wolves got her first. Or if she fell in one of the ravines and got buried in snow. This is hard country, Webb. It kills people all the time, especially those not prepared for it. Webb stared at Mac, clearly not believing him. But without proof, there was nothing he could do. We'll be back, Mr. Sullivan, and we'll be watching this ranch. If she's here, we'll find her. You do what you need to do, Mac said. After they left, Mac waited a full hour before retrieving Stella from the hiding place. She emerged pale and shaking, her violet eyes wide. They were in James's room, she whispered. I could hear them above me, throwing things around. I know. Mac guided her back to the house, his anger barely contained. But they're gone now. For how long? Stella sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Mac, I can't keep hiding like this. Can't keep bringing danger to you and Tom. Maybe I should just run, try to reach Canada. No. Mac's voice was firm. Running didn't work before, won't work now. They'll track you down, and next time you might not survive the cold. Then what do we do? Tom entered from the barn, brushing snow from his coat. I've been thinking about that. Those papers Webb had, they claimed ownership based on the Transcontinental Exhibition Company's records. But who says those records are legal? What do you mean? Mac asked. I mean, maybe we fight them. Legally. Find a lawyer, challenge their ownership claim. Tom sat down across from Stella. You're a thinking, feeling being. You can talk, reason, make choices. That means you're a person, not property. We just need someone to argue that in court. No court will side with an alien over a company with federal connections, Stella said bitterly. Maybe not in Montana. But what about in Washington? What about taking this to the newspapers? Tom warmed to his idea. There are people back east who care about justice. Abolitionists who'd see the parallels to slavery. If we can get your story out there. That's dangerous, Mac interrupted. Once Stella's story is public, everyone will know where she is. They already know where she is, Tom countered. Webb isn't going to give up. He'll keep coming back, keep searching. At least if we go public, there's attention on her. Harder for them to just snatch her in the night. Mac considered this. It went against every instinct he had to protect Stella by keeping her hidden. But Tom had a point. Hiding wasn't working. There's a reporter in Butte, Mac said slowly. Frank Morrison. He's known for taking on unpopular causes. Wrote a series of articles about mine safety that got men killed in accidents. Would he help us? Stella asked. Might, if we can get him the story without Webb finding out. Mac stood pacing. It's risky. Once we do this, there's no going back. Stella becomes a public figure, for better or worse. Better that than living in fear forever, Stella said quietly. She stood, moving to the window where she could see the mountains in the distance. I've spent 20 years as someone's property, someone's entertainment. If there's even a chance to live as a free person, I have to take it. Mac saw the determination in her face and felt a surge of pride. This was the same woman who'd jumped from a moving train to escape captivity. She wasn't going to be cowed by threats. All right, he said. Tom, can you get a message to Morrison without Webb knowing? I know a route through the back country. Take me 3 days, but I can do it. Then go. Tell Morrison we have a story that could change how America thinks about beings from other worlds. Tell him. Mac paused, choosing his words carefully. Tell him it's a story about freedom, about what it means to be a person, and about an old rancher who'd rather die than see someone enslaved. Tom nodded, and left to prepare for the journey. Stella turned to Mac, her eyes shining. You really believe this could work? That people would care about what happens to me? I believe there are more good people than bad in this world, Mac said. And I believe that once folks hear your story, hear what was done to you and those others, they won't be able to ignore it. And if I'm wrong, if they side with the company? Mac took her hand, feeling the cool smoothness of her blue skin. Then we fight anyway, because some things are worth fighting for, even when you know you might lose. Stella squeezed his hand. Thank you, Mac, for believing I'm worth fighting for. You're family now, Mac said simply. And I protect family. That night, after Tom had left for Butte, Mac found Stella sitting on the porch despite the cold, looking up at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked, sitting beside her. I keep thinking about the others. The ones who were with me in that railroad car. She pointed at the sky. Somewhere up there are their worlds, their real homes. And they'll never see them again. Never be free. We'll help them, Mac promised. Once we get this sorted out with you, we'll find a way to help the others. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll try. That's all any of us can do. Try to make things better. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the northern lights dance across the Montana sky. Finally, Stella spoke again. Mac, why do you think I ended up here? At your station in that storm? Don't know. Fate, maybe. Or luck. Or maybe Sarah's been guiding things from wherever she is. Mac smiled. She was always good at that, putting people where they needed to be. I think you're where I needed to be, Stella said softly. You and Tom. The first humans who treated me like I mattered. You do matter. More than you know. As they went inside for the night, Mac felt the weight of what they were about to do. Going public would bring danger, attention, possibly violence. But it would also bring a chance, a slim chance, at real freedom for Stella. And that chance was worth any risk. Frank Morrison arrived at the ranch 2 weeks later, hidden in the back of a supply wagon. He was younger than Mac expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and ink stains on his fingers. He carried a notebook and pencil, and the hunger for a good story radiated off him like heat. Mr. Sullivan, he said, shaking Mac's hand firmly. Your man Tom told me quite a tale. I'll admit, I was skeptical, but I've been doing some digging, and what I found. He shook his head. I think you're sitting on the biggest story of the century. How so? Mac asked, leading him into the house where Stella waited nervously in the kitchen. Because you're not alone. Morrison pulled out a sheaf of papers from his bag. I found reports, suppressed reports, of other beings like your Stella being captured and sold. The Transcontinental Exhibition Company is just one of several organizations involved. This goes deep, Mr. Sullivan. All the way to Washington, from what I can tell. Stella appeared in the doorway, and Morrison froze, seeing her for the first time. Mac watched the reporter's face cycle through shock, wonder, and finally determination. Miss Stella, Morrison said, recovering. Would you be willing to tell me your story? Everything, from the beginning? For the next 3 hours, Stella talked. She told Morrison about being taken from her world as a child, about the years performing in exhibitions, about the 12 others in the railroad car. She showed him the scars on her wrists where chains had rubbed her skin raw, told him about the beatings when she didn't perform well enough. Morrison wrote furiously, occasionally asking questions, his face growing darker with anger as Stella's story unfolded. This is worse than I imagined, he said finally. Miss Stella, with your permission, I'd like to publish this. But I need you to understand. Once this story breaks, your life will never be private again. You'll be famous, controversial. Some people will support you. Others will call you a liar, or worse. Will it help the others? Stella asked. The ones still being held. It might, if we can turn public opinion, pressure Congress to investigate. Morrison nodded. Yes, it could help them. Then do it. Stella's voice was steady. Tell my story. Tell all of it. Morrison's article ran in the Butte Miner 3 days later, then was picked up by papers in Helena, Denver, and finally by the San Francisco Examiner. Within a week, Stella's story was national news. The response was explosive. Letters poured into the ranch, some supportive, some hateful. Reporters began showing up, camping on the edge of Mac's property. The sheriff had to post deputies to keep the crowds away. And through it all, Webb and his men watched and waited. You've made a mistake, Mr. Sullivan, Webb said when he appeared again at the ranch, this time without the sheriff. My employers are not pleased with this publicity. They've instructed me to recover their property by any means necessary. She's not property, Mac said, his rifle across his lap as he sat on the porch. And if you try to take her, it won't go well for you. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. Mac's voice was cold. This is Montana, not some city back east. Out here, a man protects what's his. Stella is under my protection. That means she stays here until a court says otherwise. Webb smiled, but it was an ugly expression. Courts can be bought, Mr. Sullivan. And my employers have very deep pockets. After Webb left, Tom emerged from the house. That was a threat, boss. A real threat. I know. Mac stood, watching Webb ride away. He's going to try something. Soon. The attack came 2 nights later. Mac woke to the smell of smoke. He was out of bed and grabbing his rifle before his mind fully processed the danger. Fire. The barn was on fire. Stella! Tom! He shouted, running down the stairs. They met him in the kitchen, Tom already armed, Stella pale but calm. They're trying to smoke us out, Tom said. Drive us outside where they can grab her. Or kill us all and claim we died in an accident, Mac added grimly. He moved to the window. In the firelight from the burning barn, he could see figures moving. At least 6 men, maybe more. The horses, Stella said, her voice breaking. We have to save them. It's a trap, Stella. They want you to run out there. I don't care. She moved toward the door. I won't let innocent animals burn because of me. Mac caught her arm. Wait. Let me think. But there was no time to think. The fire was spreading fast, and he could hear the terrified screams of the horses trapped inside. Every instinct Mac had as a rancher screamed at him to save them. All right, he said. Tom, you cover us from the upstairs window. Stella, stay behind me. We go fast, get the animals out, then fall back to the house. They moved quickly, Mac leading with his rifle ready. As they reached the barn, figures emerged from the shadows. Webb and his men, guns drawn. That's far enough, Mr. Sullivan, Webb called. Send out the girl, and we'll put out the fire. Otherwise, you all burn. Not going to happen, Mac said. Then you're all fools. Webb raised his gun. The shot that rang out didn't come from Webb. It came from behind Mac, from the house. Tom's rifle boomed, and one of Webb's men went down with a scream. Chaos erupted. Men scattered, returning fire. Mac pulled Stella down behind a water trough as bullets whined overhead. The barn was fully engulfed now, the heat intense. We need to get those horses out, Stella shouted over the gunfire. You'll be killed. Then cover me. Before Mac could stop her, Stella was up and running toward the barn door. Mac fired, keeping Webb's men pinned down, while Stella disappeared into the smoke and flames. Stella! Mac's heart stopped. He'd just met her 3 weeks ago, but the thought of losing her now. Then she emerged, leading Buck and 2 other horses. They followed her calmly despite the fire, despite the gunfire. She went back in, came out with more. Trip after trip into the inferno, saving every animal while Mac and Tom fought off Webb's men. When the last horse was safe, Stella collapsed in the snow, coughing, her hair singed and her blue skin darkened with soot. Mac ran to her, scooping her up. You crazy, brave girl, he said, carrying her back toward the house. A figure stepped in front of them, Webb, his gun pointed at Stella's head. End of the line, Sullivan. Give her to me, or I'll shoot you both right here. Mac stared down the barrel of Webb's gun and saw death waiting. But he didn't move, didn't hand Stella over. No, he said simply. Webb's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot, when it came, wasn't from Webb's gun. It came from the road, where Sheriff Rawlings sat on horseback with a rifle smoking in his hands. Webb looked down in shock at the red blooming across his chest, then fell face first into the snow. Federal warrant or not, Sheriff Rawlings said, dismounting. We don't tolerate arson and attempted murder in Montana. And Mr. Sullivan, I think it's time we had a real conversation about who has legal jurisdiction over Miss Stella. As deputies rounded up the rest of Webb's men, as neighbors arrived to help put out what remained of the barn fire, Mac held Stella and realized something profound. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. The trial took place 6 months later in Helena, Montana's capital. By then, Stella's case had become a national sensation. The question before the court was simple but profound. Was Stella Sullivan, she'd taken Mac's last name legally by then, a person with rights or property to be reclaimed? Mac sat in the courtroom's front row, Tom beside him, watching Stella testify. She wore a simple blue dress that Sarah would have liked, her silver-streaked hair pinned up. Despite her obvious nerves, she spoke clearly, telling her story to a packed courtroom. The Transcontinental Exhibition Company had sent a team of lawyers, expensive men from Boston, who argued property rights and contracts. But Frank Morrison's articles had stirred up a storm back east. Abolitionists, civil rights advocates, even some churches had rallied to Stella's defense. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Thorpe, listened to both sides with an impassive face. When the arguments concluded, she took only 10 minutes to render her verdict. The question before this court, Judge Thorpe said, is whether Miss Sullivan is a person or property under the law. The defense argues she is property based on contracts signed by the Transcontinental Exhibition Company. The prosecution argues she is a person based on her demonstrated intelligence, free will, and capacity for choice. The courtroom held its breath. I find that no contract can supersede a person's fundamental right to freedom. Miss Sullivan has clearly demonstrated she is a thinking, feeling being capable of making her own choices. Therefore, I rule that she is a person under the law, with all the rights and protections that entails. The Transcontinental Exhibition Company's claim of ownership is null and void. The courtroom erupted. Mac felt tears on his cheeks, something he hadn't allowed himself since Sarah's funeral. Stella turned in the witness box, finding his eyes across the crowd, and smiled through her own tears. They'd won. But more than that, they'd changed something fundamental. Judge Thorpe's ruling set a precedent that rippled across the country. Within months, other beings like Stella were challenging their captivity, using her case as a blueprint for freedom. Tom led the effort to find and free the 12 who'd been in the railroad car with Stella. It took a year, but one by one, they were located and brought to Montana. Mac's ranch became a sanctuary, a place where beings from other worlds could live freely under Montana's big sky. Stella threw herself into the work with passionate intensity. She learned to read fluently, studied law, and eventually became an advocate for others like herself. She traveled, always with Mac or Tom accompanying her, speaking to groups, testifying before Congress, pushing for formal legal protections. And through it all, the ranch remained home. 5 years after that night in the blizzard, Mac stood on his porch watching Stella work with a young being from another world, this one with skin like tree bark and eyes like liquid gold. She was teaching him to communicate with the ranch's cattle, patience in every movement. "She's changed the world, you know," Tom said, joining Mac on the porch. Tom was 30 now, married to a woman from town, with a baby on the way. But he still worked the ranch, still protected their unusual family. "She's changed my world," Mac agreed. "Gave me a reason to keep living when I thought I was done." "She's talking about opening a school," Tom said. "For beings like her and the others. Teach them about Earth, about their rights, about how to live free." "Let her. We've got the land for it." Mac was 70 now, his hair gone completely white, his movements slower. But his eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been before Stella. Some mornings his chest hurt, a deep ache that spoke of time running out. But he didn't mind. He'd lived long enough to see something miraculous. A young woman with blue skin teaching the world about freedom and dignity. That night, as had become their custom, Mac and Stella sat on the porch watching the northern lights dance across the sky. "Do you ever think about going home?" Mac asked. "To your own world?" Stella was quiet for a moment. "This is my home now. You, Tom, the others we've saved, you're my family. My real family. I'm glad." Mac took her hand, feeling the familiar coolness of her blue skin. "I want you to know something, Stella. When my time comes, and it's coming soon, I can feel it, I want you to have the ranch. All of it. Turn it into that school you've been talking about." "Mac, don't talk like that." "Hush now. Let an old man speak." Mac squeezed her hand. "You gave me 5 good years, girl. 5 years of purpose and meaning I thought were gone forever. You saved me just as much as I saved you that night. Maybe more." Stella leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, watching the lights play across the Montana sky. 2 years later, Marcus Sullivan died peacefully in his sleep, at 72 years old. The funeral drew people from across Montana and beyond. Freed beings from a dozen different worlds came to pay respects to the man who'd chosen kindness over profit, who'd fought for freedom when it would have been easier to look away. Stella stood at his grave beside Sarah's, reading from one of James's books Mac had loved. Her voice was steady, though tears streaked her blue cheeks. "He used to tell me," she said to the assembled crowd, "that every person who crosses your path is there for a reason. I crossed his path on the worst night of my life, and he gave me everything: safety, family, purpose. He taught me that being human isn't about what you look like. It's about what you choose to do when someone needs help." She placed a flower on his grave, a Montana wildflower, Sarah's favorite. "Thank you, Mac, for seeing me as a person when no one else would. For fighting for me. For loving me like I was your own daughter. I'll make sure your legacy lives on." 10 years after Mac's death, the Sullivan Ranch had transformed into something neither Mac nor Stella could have fully imagined that night in the blizzard. The original ranch house still stood, lovingly maintained, but it was now surrounded by a dozen other buildings. Classroom buildings where beings from across the stars learned about Earth and their rights under the law. Dormitories where they lived while finding their feet in this new world. A library filled with books in dozens of languages, both human and alien. Stella stood on the porch of Mac's old house. She still lived there, in James's old room, watching the sun set over the Bridger Mountains. She was 40 now, her pale blue skin showing fine lines around her eyes, her silver-streaked hair pinned up in the style Sarah had once favored. "Miss Sullivan?" A young voice called. One of the students, a girl with green-tinged skin and triple-jointed fingers, approached nervously. "I finished the essay you assigned, about what freedom means." Stella took the paper, smiling. "Thank you, Lyra. I'll read it tonight." As the girl scampered off, Tom approached, moving slower now at 55 but still strong. His own son walked beside him, a young man of 20 who'd grown up playing with alien children and thought nothing of it. "Big day tomorrow," Tom said. "The dedication ceremony. Tomorrow, they would unveil a statue of Mac in front of the school. Marcus Sullivan, the plaque would read, who chose compassion over profit and changed a world." "He would have hated it," Stella said with a laugh. "All that attention." "He would have loved it," Tom countered, "because it means his choice mattered, that what he did started something bigger than himself." Stella looked out at the school, at the beings from a dozen different worlds learning and playing and living free lives. Some would stay on Earth, make it their home. Others would eventually return to their own worlds, carrying stories of the ranch in Montana where they'd found sanctuary. "Do you think we've done enough?" Stella asked quietly. "There are still beings out there being exploited. Still companies trying to profit from slavery." "We've done more than enough," Tom said firmly. "You've freed over 200 beings in the last decade. You've changed laws, changed minds. Mac would be proud." Stella touched the locket she always wore, a gift from Tom on the anniversary of Mac's death. Inside was a small photograph of Mac, Sarah, and James, a family she'd never met but felt connected to through Mac's stories. "I miss him," she admitted. "Every day." "I know, but he's here." Tom gestured at the school, at the freed beings, at the legacy they'd built together. "In every person you save, every life you change. He's here." That night, Stella sat at Mac's old desk, writing in the journal she'd kept since his death. It was a record of everyone they'd helped, every victory won, every life changed. She'd promised Mac on his deathbed that she'd continue the fight, and she'd kept that promise. A soft knock interrupted her writing. "Come in." The door opened to reveal a young man, human around 30, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Dr. James Morrison, Frank Morrison's son, had become the school's primary physician. He was also, though neither had spoken it aloud yet, becoming important to Stella in ways that both frightened and thrilled her. "Working late again?" he asked. "Can't seem to stop." Stella gestured at the journal. So many stories to tell. So many people to help. James sat across from her, studying her face. "Stella, you can't save everyone. You know that, right? I can try. Mac wouldn't want you to burn yourself out. Mac would want me to fight until there's no fight left." Stella met his eyes. "That's what he taught me. That's his legacy." "His legacy," James said gently, "is also teaching you that it's okay to live. To be happy. To have your own life, not just dedicate everything to saving others." Stella was quiet, considering this. In the 15 years since that blizzard, she'd rarely thought about her own happiness. She'd been so focused on fulfilling Mac's legacy, on saving others like herself, that she'd forgotten she was allowed to want things for herself. "I don't know how," she admitted quietly. "To just live. To be happy. Maybe start small." James smiled. "There's a town dance next week. Would you go with me?" Stella felt something flutter in her chest. Hope, possibility, life. "Mac would tell me to say yes, wouldn't he? He'd probably tell you that he didn't save you from slavery, just so you could make yourself a slave to his memory." Stella laughed, a real laugh that felt like sunshine after rain. "All right then. Yes. I'll go." As James left, Stella turned back to her journal. But instead of writing about battles fought and freedoms won, she wrote something different. "Today I realized that Mac didn't just teach me to fight. He taught me to live. He showed me that freedom isn't just about not being enslaved. It's about choosing your own path, your own happiness, your own future. I think it's time I honored his memory by doing what he would want. Living a full life, not just fighting for others, but also finding joy for myself. Because that's what Mac did when he found me in that blizzard. He didn't just save my life. He gave me a life worth living. Thank you, Mac. For everything. I promise I'll keep fighting for others. But I also promise I'll let myself live. Because that's what you would want." She closed the journal and walked to the window. Outside, the Montana night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead with impossible brightness. Somewhere up there were the worlds of every being she'd helped save. And here on Earth was the home Mac had given her. Stella touched the locket at her throat, feeling Mac's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. "I hope I made you proud," she whispered to the night. And somewhere, in whatever place old soldiers and kind hearts go, Marcus Sullivan smiled. Because Stella had done more than make him proud. She'd become exactly what he'd seen in her that night in the blizzard, a person of courage and compassion who would change the world. His frozen angel had learned to fly. And the legacy of one old rancher and one blue-skinned woman from the stars would echo through generations, a testament to the power of choosing kindness, of seeing people instead of profit, of fighting for freedom even when the odds seemed impossible. The star of Bitter Creek had become a beacon for the lost, the enslaved, the forgotten, just as Mac had always known she would.